The night was dark, and the river roared louder than ever before. Rain poured heavily over the village of Zambari. Inside a small hut, screams filled the air. "Push, Lami, push!" cried old midwife Bulow, her wrinkled hands gripping the young woman's knee. Lami, a young woman with deep brown skin and large, terrified eyes, let out another cry of pain. Her husband, Kumo, outside worried, gripping his hand tightly. "You can do this, my love," Kumo shouted, though fear shook his voice. With one final scream, the first baby slipped into Bulow's hands. The old midwife gasped. "A girl! It's a girl!" Her skin color. Before Lami could even catch her breath, another sharp pain shot through her body. "There is another!" Bulow cried in shock. Lami groaned, her body trembling. With one last push, the second baby arrived. Bulow's eyes widened in horror. A boy, with same white body, but when the midwife held up the first child, the room fell silent. Lami, drenched in sweat, reached out, weakly. "My son, let me see him." The midwife hesitated. The other women whispered, their eyes wide with fear. Then one of them muttered, "A curse." Kumo, who had been waiting outside, rushed in, his heart pounding. "What is happening?" Then he saw them. Two small, fragile bodies, white as the morning mist, hair like the silver moon, eyes that gleamed like blue fire. Kumo's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything like this. Neither had the midwives. One of them backed away, pressing her hand to her mouth. "This is forbidden," another woman whispered. "Children like these are an insult to Aju." A third midwife trembled. "The gods demand their blood." Lami's heart stopped. She clutched her babies tightly. "No," she gasped, sweat mixing with tears. "They are my sons." One of the women stepped forward. "Lami, you know the law. Any child born different—" Kumo grabbed his spear. "Anyone who touches them dies," he growled. The women froze. Then one of them ran. "To the elders," she shouted. "They must know." Kumo and Lami locked eyes. They had no time. Kumo wrapped the twins in a cloth, his hands shaking. "We have to go," he said. "Now." Lami, still weak from childbirth, gritted her teeth and nodded. Kumo threw supplies into a small sack. Dried meat, a water skin, a knife. Outside, they could hear the village waking up. The sound of footsteps, voices, rising in alarm. "The cursed children, bring them out." Kumo lifted Lami onto his back and held the twins close to his chest. Then, without looking back, he ran. Through the narrow paths, past the sleeping huts, past the great shrine of Aju, where the elders had already begun to light their torches. The night was their only shield, but the village was chasing them. Drums thundered in the distance. The sound of warriors shouting filled the air. "They are escaping! Find them before sunrise!" Kumo ran faster, his feet pounding against the damp earth. Behind them, torches burned bright, flickering between the trees. Lami clung to him, her breath ragged. She could hear the warriors getting closer. Then, a spear whistled past them, burying itself into a tree. Kumo cursed under his breath. They were too close. Lami looked up, desperation in her eyes. "Kumo, if they catch us, they won't." His voice was firm. He refused to let fear take her. But the warriors were fast, and Kumo was carrying everything. His wife, his children, his hope. Then a clearing appeared ahead. The river. The water was wild, roaring against the rocks. It was dangerous, but so was staying. Kumo turned to Lami. "Do you trust me?" She didn't hesitate. "With my life." He kissed her forehead. Then, with all the strength he had left, the jump into the river, into the unknown, into a new life. It was at the village festival, the night the sky burned with fireflies and the drums shook the earth. She was barefoot, laughing, spinning in circles with her long dark braids swung as she danced. Then she felt his eyes on her. She turned, and there he was, Kumo, tall, broad-shouldered, with skin like polished mahogany and eyes deep as the river. He wasn't the loudest or the most decorated warrior, but there was something about him, something that made her breath catch. And when he smiled, the whole world faded. The next day, Kumo found her by the river, where she washed clothes with the other girls. He didn't speak at first, just stood nearby, skipping stones across the water. Lami tried to ignore him, but her heart hammered. Finally, she sighed. "Are you going to say something, or do you just enjoy standing there like a tree?" Kumo grinned. "I was waiting for you to notice me." Lami rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. From that day, he found every excuse to see her. When she fetched water, he carried her pots. When she walked home, he walked beside her. When she laughed, he watched her like she was the only thing in the world. And when the village gossiped about their growing love, Kumo only smiled. "Let them talk," he told her one night. "I have already decided. It is you, Lami. It will always be you." Her heart soared. Not everyone was happy. Lami's mother warned her, "Kumo is strong, but he has little wealth. Marry a man who can provide." The village elders whispered, "She is too wild. A wife should be calm, quiet." Even Lami had doubts. "What if I am not enough for you?" she asked one night when the stars hung heavy above them. Kumo took her hands, his voice steady. "You are more than enough. You are the only dream I have." And when he said it, she believed him. On their wedding night, they stood by the river, alone beneath the moonlight. Lami's hands trembled as she traced the scars on his arms, the marks of a warrior, of a man who had fought for his place in the world. Kumo cupped her face, his touch warm, steady. "Are you afraid?" she whispered. "No." Then he kissed her, and in that moment, Lami knew. No matter what the future held, no matter what storms came their way, their love would endure. Lami sat by the riverbank, her bare feet sinking into the cool sand, watching the water dance under the moonlight. Another night, another prayer. She pressed her hands together, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, great ones, have you forgotten me? It's been 10 years. I have been begging you for a child." The river answered with silence. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. Tonight, like every other night for the past 10 years, she would go home to a house that felt too big, too quiet, too empty. Kumo was waiting for her when she returned. He was sitting by the fire, his strong dark arms resting on his knees. His eyes, always kind, always patient, studied her. "You went to the river again," he said softly. Lami sighed, sinking beside him. "I had to." He reached for her hand, tracing small circles with his thumb. "Lami, you do this every night. It is hurting you." She looked away. Not more than the whispers. Kumo stiffened. He had heard them too. At first, people were polite. "Your time will come." Then they started questioning, after some years. Has she done something wrong with her womb? Then the mockery began. At the market, women exchanged looks when Lami passed. "She walks with her head high, but who is she? A woman without a womb is a man. She should give Kumo another wife. A man deserves to have children that will bear his name." Even her closest friends turned on her. One afternoon, she overheard them talking. "Poor Kumo," we warned him, one of them said. "He is a good man. It is a shame he is tied to a barren woman." Lami's heart shattered. She rushed home, locked herself inside, and cried until the sun set. That night, she didn't eat. She didn't speak. She just lay beside Kumo, staring at the ceiling. Finally, in the darkness, she whispered, "Take another wife." Kumo turned sharply. "What?" She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I have failed you. The people are right." Kumo sat up, angry now. "And since when do you care about their words?" She bit her lip. "Since they became my truth." Kumo pulled her close, forcing her to look at him. His voice was fierce, full of love and pain. "You are my wife, the woman I chose. I will not trade you like cattle." Tears rolled down her face. "But you deserve a son." Kumo pressed his forehead against hers. "You are enough. With or without a child, you are enough." She wanted to believe him, but the emptiness in her heart refused to be silenced. One night, when the burden was too much, Lami ran to the river. She fell to her knees, her sobs mixing with the rushing water. "Please, if I have done wrong, forgive me. If you can hear me, do not let me die like this. Do not let me live in shame." She cried until she had no more strength, her forehead pressed against the wet earth. Then, the river stilled, the wind stopped, a soft hum filled the air, like a lullaby carried by the waves. Lami's breath hitched. She lifted her head, and the water goddess emerged. She rose from the water like a vision, tall, curvy, her body shimmering like liquid silver. Her face was smooth, ageless, with piercing eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. Her 8 hands moved gracefully, each one glowing with power. Lami trembled. "Great Mother," she whispered. The goddess smiled. "You have called me for many years." Lami's lip quivered. "Why have you never answered me?" The goddess moved closer to her, cupping Lami's face with one of her many hands. "Because you needed to break first," Lami gasped. "Break?" The goddess's eyes softened. "A broken vessel holds blessings deeper than one that has never known thirst." Lami didn't understand, but she was too desperate to argue. "Please, if there is kindness in your heart, do not let me leave empty again." The goddess tilted her head, considering. Then she touched Lami's stomach with 2 of her hands. A warmth spread through her body, a light, a pulse, something ancient and powerful. Lami gasped, gripping her belly. What is this?" The goddess smiled. "The gods has answered." Then, as suddenly as she came, she faded into the water. The wind returned. The river roared again. Lami sat there, hands on her stomach, her heart racing. And for the first time in 10 years, she felt full. Lami became pregnant, and her home and life was filled with joy. People that gossiped about her was put to shame. For years, no one saw them again. The village believed they had drowned, swallowed by the angry waters. But far beyond the reach of Arju's temple, deep in the forest, past the mountains where no one dared to go, Kumo built a home, a place where his sons could grow without fear, a place where Lami could whisper their names without shame, a place where the gods of the village could never touch them. The midwife Mamabulo sometimes traveled far, sneaking into the deep forest to bring them foodstuffs. And so, the white-skinned twins, Zila and Tano, grew up beneath the trees, under the watchful eyes of the river and the whispering forest. The twins, Zila and Tano, crouched behind a thick cluster of bushes, their pale skin blending with the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. They were 10 years old now, their limbs long and lean, their white hair wild and untamed. Zila pressed her face through the branches, eyes wide with wonder. "Look, Tano," she whispered. Beyond the bush, the village buzzed with life. Children laughed and played, kicking a ball of woven leaves. Girls jumped rope, their giggles echoing like a melody. Boys chased each other, their voices full of joy. Tano pulled back, his eyes wary. We shouldn't be here. Zila's lips quivered, but she didn't move. Just a little longer. They watched, silent and hidden. A girl with beaded braids shrieked as a boy caught her. You're it. Another boy climbed a tree, his friends cheering him on. Climb higher. Zila's fingers dug into the earth. Why can't we play like that? Tano sighed, his eyes darkening. Because we're not like them. Zila turned to him, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. But we're just children too. Tano shook his head, the sunlight catching the silver strands of his hair. Not to them. Zila's voice broke. But why? Tano's gaze dropped to the ground. Because when they see us, they see ghosts.